Hello, everybody. This is the Earthdawn panel where we talk about the things that we're working on and answer questions and things like that. I'm Josh. I am one of the members of the Earthdawn development team. It really is a team effort. I found as the process went on in the early stages of Earthdawn 4th edition that um, I really need more people working on things because we all do this in our spare time, such as it is. And so there you go. Why don't we have the others introduce themselves and then we'll go from there. Kyle?
Hello, everyone. I'm Kyle Pritchard. I got started in, I joined Earthdawn team in 2018. Before that, I had been writing Legends of Barsave Adventures as a freelancer. And recently, I managed to be lead writer on the Empty Thrones book, which is hopefully coming out of the printer soon. So I'm excited to be here and talk about all stuff Earthdawn.
Allegro. I'm also on the Earthdawn development team along with Kyle. We started on the Legends of Barsave series, and then we got pulled into full team members. We worked on Elven Nations together, and then we've broken off, and I'm working currently on the Grand Bazaar source book.
Cool. And hey, everybody, I'm Carl Arboltowski. Sorry I don't have video. Also
That's
started
okay.
with Kyle.
You're
and
actually here.
I am. I just can't get video working. Sorry,
It's
everybody.
okay.
But yeah.
Person.
If I wanted video, I would have to sacrifice audio, which is unfortunately the problem with my thing. But yeah, so I started with Kyle and Mike freelancing in Legends of Barsave, if you can't sense a theme. And we all joined along with them on back in 2018. I've contributed to Elven Nations and Empty Thrones, and I think a little bit of specifically the Iopos source book. And now, continuing to work on Legends of Barsave. And yeah, am I allowed to say I'm working on the Kriana? Maybe? Is that too much of a reveal?
You just said it.
Yeah, I guess. Hey, everybody. Hot news. Yeah. So, doing source book material and continuing to work on Legends of Barsave.
I guess that brings it to me. I'm Morgan Weeks, and you don't get to see me on video because that would be bad for everyone. And I've been here for a while, so let's just leave it at that.
Yeah, I brought Morgan on fairly early in the process, and he has been absolutely invaluable. The compliments paid to the higher circle stuff at the tail end of the art stream that just wrapped up are largely his work. So I don't know. We would be in a very different place without him.
Well, thank you very much, Josh. I love you too.
Hi, I guess that's me. I'm James Austin. I'm the art director for Earthdawn for almost a year. I'm about 11 months right now. And in this crazy pandemic time, I've been devoting all of my spare time to working on the Iopos and Empty Thrones book, and in between some sexy pictures of ancient men. Just that's about it. I'm having a ball and meeting a lot of really fantastic people, and I hope to keep on continue doing it.
I really don't think enough nice things can be said about James and his work.
Oh,
agreed.
If you watched the art stream, you saw what he can dash off in a couple of hours.
Yeah, that was a blast. Everybody should come tomorrow morning. I was actually quite surprised at about the hour and a half mark. I was like, oh, geez, okay. I guess we'll start adding color. I guess. Everything was going very fast, and it was a ton of fun. Yep, just like everything related to FASA. A ton of fun.
So Andy doesn't seem to be providing us any direction. See, normally when we're doing this live at a con, she's standing at the end of the table with things to throw at us if we start to stray outside of our prescribed bounds of what we're allowed to talk about.
I've been doing really good about stepping back and letting the team handle everything. See? Watch
Yes.
me. Letting you all handle it. You get too far, I'll like ban you or something. I think that's like that's the thing, right?
So let's start off. What is slated up next in the queue? What is the project that is currently planned to be the next one out of the gate? I think we've got two that are sort of like running neck and neck.
Yeah, but we've got two that are racing for art right now, or racing to get to the point where they're ready for art, I think.
Okay, well, let's talk about those.
Well, I guess I can go first. So I'm actually now editing a manuscript that I've received from Nick Lowe, who contributed on Empty Thrones. And that is a manuscript for Vascothia, the region that was originally highlighted in the first edition Theron Empire book. So in that book, I think it had about 36 pages or so, and we're trying to increase it in scope to 250 page or so project. We're trying to expand it out from the deep forests a little bit. For those of you who don't know, Vascothia is the region about big scary magic and tribes in these deep forests, and Thera has successfully oppressed that nation for a long time, but during the Scourge, just like with Barsave, they had to loosen their grip a little bit, and during the Scourge, the Passions and the Horrors had some huge battle there, and the Passions of Vascothia appear to have died, and now everything is sort of coming back together 100 years after the Scourge, with Vascothians deciding if they really want to be free from Theron, the Theron Empire.
The other project would be the Grand Bazaar project. So I'm collaborating with Jacob Wise on it. He's a great freelance writer. He's been doing a lot of fun things. So we are basically starting off with the history of the Grand Bazaar. The previous products have been touched on. Here is this marketplace, but how was it built and all that stuff. So I wanted to put in a little bit more definition on that, and then give it a bit more structure as we update it in the post second war in Thrall. So they're putting in some money, they're bringing in investors, they're making some changes, and they're laying out them in more focused districts, and things like roads are also going to be a part of the book. So we're putting in some definition, breaking up the different political structure, and trying to touch on the economic impact of the Second Theron War on Thrall. Starting with what happened in the Grand Bazaar, and then potentially using that to lead in to some Easter eggs for what we might be doing next down the line, I'll say.
Well, those are both cool. And anybody who is listening either in the Discord or on Twitch, if you have any questions for us, please feel free to type them into the chat and we will address them as best we can. Morgan did an hour yesterday on his next big project, which is Magic Deeper Secrets. And that, I'm sure... Morgan, did you record that?
Yeah, I actually recorded it and edited it last night.
Cool.
So as soon as we're ready to upload stuff, it is ready to be uploaded.
Great. Yeah, there's a lot that... I don't know if you want to give us a real quick capsule summary of what's going on with that book.
Sure. It's the much anticipated and long-awaited book that addresses high circle magic, but that is by no means the only thing in it, just the most advertised piece of it. It also includes spells from circles 1 through 8 for all 5 spellcasting disciplines, a lot of new magic, and huge number of new knacks, binding secrets, improved smell knacks, 3 new types of enchanting, and potentially some other stuff as well. depending on time constraints and if we can get the design just right. But those are the focuses, and it should be there should be something for everyone in it, not just spellcasters by any stretch of the imagination.
Cool. I am starting work on, in addition to the stuff that I am doing with regards to art direction on the Legend of Barsave Adventures, which we will maybe touch on in a minute or two here, and occasional pinch hitting for layout when necessary, and acting as general lore question answerer when it comes to meetings and plans and things like that. I am starting work on what was my sort of next big dream project, going back to when I was first starting out, things that I would like to see produced for Earthdawn. And that is a book focused on Europa and the Aras coast, and maybe offering a little bit more information about the mysterious people from across the Aras Sea. I am working with a freelancer, Chris Gunning, who has done some phenomenal work with the Delta Green line. If you're familiar with that, the sort of modern day horror Call of Cthulhu thing. We're kind of just getting started on that, so that's a project that's a little ways down the road. But one of the themes that's going to be coming up in that book, as we've discussed stuff, is bringing back a little bit more of the horrors, as in the big bads of the setting, and trying to weave those into things a little bit more directly, because a lot of the stuff that we've had thus far with Travar and Iopos is a lot of, and Empty Thrones is a lot of heavy political stuff, which is fantastic and is a lot of what drives the overarching story of Barsave forward. The horrors are still a big thing going on, and while they are being explored a little bit in the Legends adventures, I want to bring those in because not far from Europa is the Abyss of Aras Nahem, where reportedly 3 of the Mad Passions are maybe protecting the world from the invasion of Ristul or various other things like that. We can go with some kind of potentially cool things that might be like islands off the coast of the of Barsave there in the Aras Sea, and maybe get some kind of jungle pulp weirdness that you can get in isolated communities and whatnot. So that's something that we've just kind of started exploring, and we've got an outline and some basic ideas that we've talked about, but we don't have any actual text yet. So that, like I said, is a book that's probably a year or more out. Hopefully we'll have that maybe sometime in the future. Carl?
Yeah, I think already kind of teased it, I guess, early on. Part of trying to build out the fourth world, we wanted to look beyond Barsave while also building out what's in Barsave. So one of those was, a pretty major element in the Theron Empire is Kriana. So we wanted to explore that a little bit more as well. So that's what I've been working on. There was a very whirlwind tour of Kriana in the first edition Theron Empire's book, as Kyle mentioned. But there is a lot of detail to explore. It's in contrast to a lot of what we see, in Barsave and like Vasgothia and neighboring areas. It's not necessarily that kind of point of light thing of very fortified communities and then like big crazy wildernesses. It's a very urbane society. It's huge as well population wise. I think like the population of the the capital itself is on par with potentially, depending on some estimates, like a good chunk of Barsave's population as a whole province. So yeah, it's very distinct on its own, and then it's also kind of inextricably tied up with Kriana. And at the end of the first edition material, it was an empire that was on the crux of really serious major changes. So yeah, we're kind of exploring those, kind of seeing how they've played out, and some of the stuff that was teased in first edition is going to be, you know, kind of moved along to see where we are now. So yeah.
Cool. So we recently released, as it's in PDF, but as part of the Empty Thrones Kickstarter, we also funded Legends of Barsay Volume 1, or Haven Volume 1, if I can remember the name correctly. Lots of colons and subheadings in that one, which collects a polished and revised version of the first 8 Legends of Barsay chapters, those being the sort of living campaign adventures that Kyle and Michael and Carl run at conventions when those are held in person, and running a couple of them here. But do you guys want to talk a little bit about what, obviously without spoiling plot details, do you want to talk a little bit about what's going on with those and the upcoming future of Legends?
Sure, I can talk a little bit and then pass some things off to Michael here. The idea, if any of you don't know, behind Legends of Barsay is that we wanted to have the ability for people to come to conventions and play Earthdawn and experience a growing narrative, because a lot of the strength of Earthdawn is just this idea that you get these thread items and the thread items grow in power, and you get to see these different factions sort of wrestling against one another, and you get to decide, your character gets to decide things and make changes in the world. And so we really wanted to be able to emphasize that while still, you know, releasing content for the line we all love and making sure that there was ways for our players to interact directly with us. So what we've done so far in this collected edition is the first 8 Legends of Barsay adventures, which are supposed to take characters from circles about 1 to 3 or so. And in it, you know, we've met a lot of these adventuring companies, and we've established this status quo for Haven where Torgak's control is maybe slipping a little bit. He's getting a little bit older, and he needs to decide what he wants to do for the future of the city. But as for the main overarching plot with horrors that Josh teased, Michael has been the mastermind of that. So I'll let him reveal whatever he wants to reveal about that.
Before we get to that, you mentioned the first 8 chapters. The collected volume also includes the prologue.
That's true.
The Masks of Fear mini adventure that was and is still included as part of the quick start guide. So that's included in the collected volume as well, along with a little bit of expanded info about Haven and that sort of thing. So there's more in there than what you would get from just the stuff. Anyway, sorry, Michael, go ahead.
So with the horror plot, it was really the idea was that, you know, we were going to have people in Haven. They may not be familiar with Haven. We wanted these to be first circle characters, and we wanted to focus the modules, at least the early ones, on, you know, teaching the game, introducing new players to the lore and whatnot. So we usually at the convention we have a mix of people who know what's going on and people who don't, and I kind of wanted to lean into that with the horror plot, where the characters are told to do things and they don't necessarily understand or think about what the consequences down the road are going to be. And so we have them introduced in the first one where they're supposed to find something and they don't necessarily find it. And then other things happen later. And it basically crescendos at part 8, where they've been through the course of 3 other adventures that kind of have a single thread going through them. Is something has happened and Haven is now in danger. And so the where we lead into for the latter half of the series is trying to keep Haven whole together and not crumbling amongst, you know, a bunch of external forces that have now focused in on Haven as being not necessarily a threat, but just easy pickings, as it were.
Cool. And so we have 109, which will be ready to be released here shortly. It's going into like final layout polish and so forth, if I'm recalling correctly. And then we've got 10, 11, and 12, which are written not necessarily respectively by, but one each by Kyle, Michael, and Carl. And those are in various stages. Obviously, plans being to have 110 come out and then 111 and 112. What are the ones that are being run here? What are the adventures that that are still available for people to sign up and play if they want to?
Later today, we actually have Michael running 113, which is way in the distant future. So it's probably a tease for our fans here.
Brand new, hot off the presses, and this will be the first playtest if people show up. So if you want your name in the credits, show up at 1 o'clock.
And then I'm running 111, which is also needs a little bit of playtesting before it enters into that final polish phase, which is at 6 Central Time. And if you showed up for that, you would also get your name in the playtesting credits.
Yeah, we absolutely...
today's game, I am running the same module tomorrow at 1 o'clock as well. So both sets of playtesters will be appreciated and necessary to our clumsy writing process.
Yeah, one of the things that is greatly appreciated by us when it comes to what we do is the support and feedback of our fan base. We've got a really great group of engaged folks, both on the Discord and that we meet at conventions, when they are physically able to be held, and various other places, and getting that feedback and appreciation is really worthwhile because we're largely all in this for the love of the game and the love of development and writing and sharing stories and doing all of that. So sign up for games and play and help us find the problems so that when we go to press, the problems aren't as major. Do you guys...
blog post specifically on that topic where it's like, this is what I thought was going to happen, and then players.
Do you guys, and maybe Carl would want to weigh in on this as well, think that the Legends series provides, in addition to providing sort of pre-generated adventures that are easier to sort of drop into an ongoing game, do you think that it also serves as an outline or an inspiration for people to perhaps newer game masters to Earthdawn to figure out how to develop their own sort of campaign arcs and storylines?
Yeah, I could. I could jump in first here. Actually, I think I wrote about this not too long ago for the Earthdawn blog. But one of the things we really wanted to do was not only provide an easy in for players, but also for game masters who pick it up and kind of want to see what the anatomy of an Earthdawn adventure is. And yeah, on a larger scale, we just figured Haven was really perfect for people who, either longtime fans who want to know more about Parlainth in this area that hasn't necessarily gotten the love we think it deserves in the past, and then also just something that has a really tight focus to begin with, which is Haven's basically a small frontier town. You can keep the plots very like localized, or the tensions very very narrow if you want to start out, but there are seeds that are kind of planted everywhere, even going back to the first edition Parlainth and Haven stuff that could spin off into big campaigns. And I think we've already kind of begun exploring some of those, the big one of course being kind of the leadership struggle that Kyle Kyle talked about with, Torgak and his folks getting old, and then, how is it going to look, once they're not really in the picture anymore. And then we have a big classic, setup for a horror adventure, like a big horror that's looming over all of this and kind of the effects it would have on a small town like that. So, and on top of that, it's full of adepts. There's a very good reason for adepts to be there in spades. There's plenty of ruins and other fun stuff to explore. So we just, looking at it, we thought this appeals to a pretty broad, cross section of players. You can get your more kind of intrigue and social gaming. You can get your classic dungeon delves. You can get that kind of survival horror element. It really does fit a lot of people. So the Haven Guide and the collection of adventures, we really hope kind of, with the additional fleshed out information, will give people plenty of material to work off of and plenty of frameworks they can build off of.
Kyle, Michael, anything to add to that?
I got nothing to add. That's good. Good job, Carl.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good summary. One of the main reasons why I think Haven was a good pick was just because of the fact that it is a frontier town that's out in the middle of nowhere, and it has an excuse to have a lot of adepts, and then it also doesn't have the kind of political pull you would expect from a place with all these magicians and powerful people, because they're busy dealing with the ruins. So if it, like, depending on what we want to do with it, we could kind of keep it in its own bubble as we developed these adventures, and wouldn't have to worry too much about how, say, the events of Empty Thrones would play here, so you could play them in any order. But to get to Josh's first question, I definitely think that these adventures can really show a GM how to craft, especially low circle Earthdawn challenges where there's social interaction, here's a combat, here's different ways that you can prepare for a threat of coming up, et cetera, et cetera.
Cool. All right. Well, we're about halfway through, and do not yet have any questions. Please, if you have them, drop them either in the main room Discord chat, or if you're watching on Twitch, you can drop them there. We've talked about what we're working on. Now we're going to get into purely speculative ideas.
Or just things that maybe we'd like to see.
Yeah, that's what I was going to get in. Let's
Yeah.
Okay, so we know what we've each got our project that we've talked about and that we're working on. What ideally would you like to work on as the next project after the one that you're currently going with? Is there anything that you? Sorry, Andy, what?
Can I tell you the ones I want?
Yeah, please. Let's start with you. You've been quiet.
I have Australia. I'd like to see something on Australia, and I'd like to see something with like the Aztecs or the Mayans, or in India. Those are the three I'd like. Still,
Okay.
I don't think that I'm not saying we're getting them. Just saying I want them.
Yeah, that's what this is. This is a wish list.
It's good to want things.
It is. I just got to find a writer. That's the big one, is finding the right writer, I think.
And getting the rest of the team to agree with your plans.
I only have to get 3 out of 5, darling. Welcome to voting. I only got to convince 3 out of 5.
So, Morgan, after Deeper Secrets, and in the midst of all the other system work that you do for us, with us, do you have anything that is on your wish list as far as something that you'd like to see or that you would like to work on?
Well, there's one book I alluded to in my chat yesterday, which is, and we've talked about in the past, and that's venturing deeper into the spirit worlds, which would be interesting. I'd like to see the named horrors that I wrote up for the companion that were cut get published at some point. And I'd like to revisit the Adept's Journey series with something that addresses the disciplines themselves rather than just paths. And have a notebook full of ideas regarding things to do for them. And maybe a couple new disciplines that might show up at some point.
Cool. Kyle?
For me, I've had this idea. Well, I've got two big ideas on the back burner that it would be nice to have. One that I think would be amazing is a revamp of the Serpent River book for the 4th edition timeline. There's some nice products coming out of Germany that have some Serpent River content, but getting things together for this is how Barsave looks and how the various houses look after the Second Theron War and after the events of Empty Thrones, I think could be very interesting and could be a nice way to build up the world of Barsave and sort of explain some of the questions that I think our fans have had of how exactly did this go down? What exactly is going on in this city? And for the most part, up to this point, we've been like, however you want it to look like. But I think we have some cool ideas that we could hang some things on in the future. And then another thing that I would like to explore further that I only got to touch on in Empty Thrones is dragons and what they might be up to, because the time skip hasn't done a ton to their plans. They think on the longer scale, so I'm interested in diving into their goals.
Cool. Michael?
I got a couple of projects in mind, mostly in the western side of Barsave. So one of the things that I want to do is, go back to the waste. When we originally did Elven Nations, we had a bit more content that was actually able to fit inside the product. And so going back there and exploring some of the cut content, some of the ideas that we originally had when we were scoping out the book is something that I'd like to do. The other thing is, again, along those lines, delving into Bloodwood in terms of an adventure arc series and not necessarily source book material. We tried to put in a few, Easter eggs and things that would be followed up later in the Elven Nations book. And so exploring those from the perspective of the player is something I'm interested in doing.
Cool. Carl, I know that your time is precious.
Yeah, so kind of piggybacking off of what Michael said, I think there's a lot of opportunity to explore more stories in Elven Nations, and just kind of, a lot of these regions that we're outlining, such as the Elven Nations and Vasgothia, they join Barsave, and there may be big things going on there that don't one-to-one affect your average Barsavian, but they might have bigger repercussions in the Fourth World. So one thing I've been interested is, outlining some potential adventure frameworks in the style of Empty Thrones that might, maybe have a little bit more local focus, and then there'd be echoes of them elsewhere. So they're, a little bit self-contained, but still, if you're setting a campaign there, they're big enough to be, to span a full campaign. And then reversing focus entirely, I would love to explore what's going on in Thrall now. There's the original Thrall books in first edition set up a lot, and they were jam-packed with information. A lot of that may still hold, but a ton has changed. I mean, there have been momentous changes in the government there, so the balance of power in Barsave is so different that I feel like Thrall deserves its own book, basically, just to kind of explore what's going on there.
Yeah, and we're kind of starting to tease some of what's going on there, I guess, with the Grand Bazaar. It's kind of giving us an initial in on exploring those.
Yes, definitely.
For myself, the mental name that I've had working in my head, the one that Morgan mentioned, is the Astral Gazetteer, which is, would be a book focused on astral space and spirits and nether realms and things like that. That would be cool. The other big one that I want to see developed is revisit the area around Vivain and Skypoint in the wake of the Second War and everything that went on there. Anybody who's read the history in the GM's Guide and the situation that I set up with that, that is a big old like, hey, here's an unstable situation, and going and figuring out new stuff and exploring that. It was originally our original sort of outline and plans in Empty Thrones actually did kind of hook into that a little bit, but it ended up not tying into the vein that well, and so we just kind of cut all of that content, and it worked, I think, a lot better in the final version. But that's an area that that I want to see, and sort of my next big setting source book after Europa will probably be that. But whether the Astral Gazetteer goes first or that, obviously we're talking about stuff that's down the line, and no concrete plans for anything. We gotta get what's on our plate off first before we get to the next thing. Some comments did come up in the chat here. Somebody mentioned love to see a setting book in Africa in addition to Egypt. So this is above and beyond Crayana. Obviously, we've got Marak, the other Theran province that's at sort of the other end of the northern coast of that continent. But yeah, I think exploring some of potentially, with as he said in the comment, given the right author, and being cognizant of stuff like that, exploring. I mean, Africa is huge, and there is a lot of potential area to explore and maybe do something really interesting and different, but still within the Earthdawn milieu. If somebody has ideas and wants to pitch something to us, particularly somebody with connections or expertise in that area, Azania, I think is the name of it, the one that is like even further south. That would be interesting. I don't have any ideas at all about what could work with that, but that would be definitely an interesting one. Caustic mentioned,
I believe it's Aznan.
Okay.
And it's the description given in Skypoint is pretty unclear as to where exactly it is, since it seems to describe the major plateau like Kilimanjaro, but at the same time, the description is really kind of incongruous with where Kilimanjaro is.
Yeah, I've heard people think it might be like a Table Mountain in Cape Town as well, so it's like all over the place.
Which, honestly, for writing it, makes it better.
Yeah. As Joel mentions in the chat, Azania is South Africa in Shadowrun, and the names are intentionally similar, which is why I get confused, because secret, we don't actually have all of this memorized. We have reference books. Like if we need to know what something's called, we go and grab the book and look it up. Let's see. Caustic mentioned that he'd like to see a rogues gallery of sorts. I think that the idea that they have been doing with 1879, doing the little pamphlets where they describe a non-player character with hooks and all sorts of interesting stuff like that, I think that's something that could also work kind of reasonably well in Earthdawn. We just haven't had the resources time-wise to devote to working those up, because we've all been trying to get our our major products out. And one of the advantages of a digital production schedule and being able to do PDFs and things like that is to actually do smaller products that don't necessarily justify a physical print run, but that we can drop an 8 or 16 page PDF up on our website or at drive-through, for people to just as something that they can grab and use as a hook for their own adventures. And then eventually, when you have enough of them, of course, then you collect them and you do a print book. But yeah, a rogues gallery, something like that, would be cool. Let's see. Derico has a dev question about AU. I'm not sure what you mean by AU. Oh, Australia. Okay. campaign takes place there, T-Wars, etc. Oh, okay. Yeah, so what's your question? As
If
he's
you're interested in writing,
uh
I'm
yes.
confused.
Okay, so the areas that were Theron, so the island of Great Thera, which is described in the original first edition. While he's typing his question, I'll sort of answer the other one there, which was described in the first edition Theron Empire book and is sort of the center of the Theron Empire, is on an island in what in Earthdawn is called the Celestrian Sea. We know it as the Aegean today. And yes, basically, Great Thera is Atlantis. When the general gist is that when the magic level basically does what it does and is no longer able to support the society that exists there, there is a major cataclysm of some sort that basically wreaks major havoc on the island and destroys everything. And I have always considered that Great Thera is what is today the island of Santorini, which is also known as Thera in Greek. It's an island that is the caldera of a volcano and was presumably destroyed at some point in the past. So yes, Thera is supposed to be Atlantis in that sense. Could other alien have been doing stuff and maybe mimicking the Therans due to a warp in the time due to the rising magics?
In your tables game, yes.
Yeah, is it possible that the horrors? Yeah. I mean, there is, and Kyle may touch on this in the Vasgothia book. There are on setup on the island of Thera, there are 3 massive pillars made of orichalcum that are on the island and are generally considered to be a big demonstration of Thera's wealth and magical might. That if they've just got a bunch of orichalcum that's there as decoration. However, in Vasgothia, up in that area, what's going on, Kyle?
In Vasgothia, there are 3 towers that are organized in exactly the same fashion as they are on Thera, but instead of them being made out of orichalcum, they're made out of like the ruins of lost empires from throughout the world, kind of a thing. And there's even some implication that maybe the horrors have built it as some sort of a way to rebuff the magic in that area or to keep the scourge going. But these towers seem impossibly tall and reach up into the sky and cast shadows, which are deemed to be cursed throughout the entire province. There's a lot of interesting questions about it, and as Morgan talked about yesterday, there's a lot of unreliable narrator kind of facets to it of what exactly is going on here, but it's something.
Yeah. It is certainly possible. Who did we get just join us here? Oh. It's certainly possible that the horrors are involved in some way, understanding that a big part of the impetus of the Theran Empire and why they are who they are and what they're doing and what they have done in the past is all tied into basically the scourge and the magic level and the horrors and whatnot. It would absolutely make sense that the horrors would certainly the more powerful and cunning horrors would be working to counteract that in some respect. And if you kind of want to look at that as aliens or whatever, That's not how I would term them, but yeah, that's how that would work.
And depending on how you see the 1879 alternate reality over there through the looking glass, there could definitely be something else that was happening there during the time of Earthdawn that's like sort of outside of our purview, or there could even be another really powerful magical empire that we haven't really been able to touch on in the world that is doing something similar to the Therans. Certainly plausible.
Yeah, alien in the sense that we don't grok it because anything outside of our own experience. Gotcha. Yeah, I like the idea, to get back to what Andy wants, and I kind of bring this up every time. I like the idea of Australia because there's some potentially really cool stuff that can be drawn on when it comes to Earthdawn Australia. But I want to be really cognizant of what gets used and how it gets used. That's one of those cases where, again, like the right writer and sensitivity readers and things like that, because the Aboriginal tribes of Australia have had all sorts of awful stuff. Their history and their interactions with Western culture is not great. And I would want to approach what's done with them in much the same way that I would with anything exploring Africa or South America or North America, any place. Once we really start getting outside of the traditional sort of purview of Earthdawn and the Theran Empire, there's some potential to do some really, really cool stuff, but it is also very easy to mishandle it. And that, I think all of the team, would want to be really cautious with that in that regard. We are just about out of time here. We've got maybe another 5 minutes or so. If anybody else has any questions, feel free to type them up and drop them in the chat. Any other so I guess one last question to just kind of throw out to everybody, if you want to address this. Having come on now as a developer / writer / whatever, is there anything that, because I know, especially for Kyle and Michael and Carl, this is kind of their first thing, real like professional development gig and whatnot, and for me as well. And Morgan has been doing stuff for a while. Is there anything that you found, now that you're sort of behind the screen, that you found surprising or interesting or challenging that you want to mention?
Ooh, yeah, I can probably throw out one thing. When you're adventure writing, the amount of playtesting that you might need to get something just right, and then kind of the need to I don't know, kind of think past your own ego when it comes to feedback, whether it's from fellow writers or playtesting that shows that like something just doesn't work the way that you want it to. Your mind works in a way that maybe a group of players just won't jump to the same conclusions. And early on I was like, what? It totally makes sense to me. And then very quickly I was like, well, no, I'm not doing this for me. I'm telling a story for other people. Just remembering like the differences between adventure writing and like standard fiction writing or something like that. You're creating a shared experience, and you really need to make sure that that's a welcoming experience for everyone at the table. So yeah, probably the big one for me.
Yeah, I would say one of my big takeaways was once a product is released, like it's kind of out there forever. So you need to be conscious with how you're dealing with certain themes, and like try to think about like, is this sort of sending the message that I want to be sending? because like as we discussed, Haven is getting into some political snafus, and our world has been full of some political snafus recently, and a lot of people have asked me like, oh, did you take this inspiration from this thing? And I was like, actually, I released this years before that ever happened. So it's just interesting because they were drawing parallels of, oh, are you trying to say this by writing this? And I was like, I wasn't even thinking about that. But now that I've written a few things, I try to be a little bit more cognizant of theme and try to make it, I guess, a little bit clearer what sort of messages you can draw. But one of the nice things about RPGs is there's kind of something in there for anybody, and leaving it open-ended so that you can take multiple different approaches and see multiple different real world parallels, I think is very interesting.
More like just development time, the effort that goes on behind the scenes, where the public sees a 40-page pamphlet, but we sometimes put at least a year, if not more, into it. A lot of these, like Kyle, Carl, and I, we conceptualized the series. I think it's 2014 is when the original plot arc was conceived of, and we're only halfway through it so far. So again, the backlog of like I said, we're getting ready to release 109. 110, 11, 13, they've been in various stages of writing, and like I said, I'm starting to playtest 113. So just the amount of time that goes into our adventures was a bit eye opening for me. It might take us 6 months just to playtest it. Getting 2 or 3 good. That's why I talk about that convention cycle is very important for me, at least my writing process. Puts a lot of feedback from what players actually do into the modules themselves. So yeah.
All right. Well, that puts us at just a couple of minutes before the time for the next one. So I'd like to thank the rest of the team for showing up and offering their insights, and for everybody to be, who came to listen or is watching the stream live. Kyle, Michael, Carl, Morgan, Andy, and on behalf of all of you and myself, thank you everybody for being such wonderful, supportive fans. We are now, I was reminded the other day, just over 7 years from the closing of the original Earthdawn 4th edition Kickstarter. And we've got more stuff in the pipe, and that is coming down. It's not coming out as quickly as we would like, but we hope that the quality that goes into it makes the wait worthwhile for all of you. So thank you again, and hope you enjoy the rest of Freedonia Con.